Hey neighbor, this is 7 on Sunday. Today we're counting down a unique species not often seen in the wild, bands featuring a lead singer who isn't the primary lyric writer. It's safe to assume there's an intrinsic connection between band leaders singing something they wrote, but unlike what a lot of angry fans would want you to believe, it doesn't make you less of a person or an artist to sing something that somebody else wrote, especially not if it's your own friend and bandmate. If you enjoy this episode, please take a second to hit the like button and take to the comments to join the conversation. And if you're looking for even more deep dives, there's a playlist with hundreds of episodes of SOS that you can check out now, linked in the description.
Do you remember when you said to me, my friend, I'll be the present?
Architects have been a band longer than you think. The British metalcore titans made waves in the late 2010s as their popularity finally exploded, but they've been around since 2004, with their now late guitarist Searle handling the lyric writing until his tragic death at the hands of an aggressive cancer in 2016. Especially in the earlier days, the assumption for many was that it was a group effort with Architects, or that frontman Sam Carter was the one writing because that's the traditional route you expect the lead singer to write, but that's not his role at all. You'd be delusional to think that Sam's not important just because he's not the writer. His voice, more importantly, his scream, is a defining element of their sound. But Sam so rarely pens the words, even after Tom's passing, instead helping shape the melody and the music. Architects formed with a pair of brothers, guitarist Tom and drummer Dan Searle. With Dan choosing to carry the torch after his sibling's death, we unlocked another side of the band that kept the heavy without sacrificing the emotional impact of their lyrics, which is arguably the biggest thing that makes this band stand out. Artifon packed a synthesizer and looper into the size of a grapefruit with Orba. Anyone, including rhythmless me, can pick one up and have fun while learning and making music at the same time. You can use natural gestures like tapping and tilting to literally mold the sound with your hands. Orba is ready to play anywhere with its built-in speaker and a headphone jack, no dongle required. Yeah, this is especially nice because I've definitely been, maybe ever so slightly neglecting that piano. I've been playing with it in the studio when I need a break from editing or when I'm feeling creative and don't want to waste time doom scrolling. There we go. That's the Orba. Easy, fun, and portable as heck. Use code ARTV for 10% off. Check the link in the description and grab one today. Manic Street Preachers are a cutting-edge band of innovators formed in the mid-80s, thriving off of a keen sense of humorous nihilism that made them so unique in a sea of alternative rock bands who were just cutting their teeth. Maybe you've heard the name Richey Edwards at some point in your life, and given how crazy and sad this guitarist's story is, it probably overshadowed the fact that he was the primary writer on the band's first 3 albums. You could almost think of Richey as Manic's hype man. He got his start as their roadie before joining as a rhythm guitarist in 1989, but he was honestly pretty shit at the instrument, really just serving as a stage character whose importance manifested more in the role of ghostwriter. Richey's unpredictability and dwindling mental health led to him dramatically disappearing at age 27 in 1995, never to be seen again, which is absolutely wild in and of itself, but it also means that he's now been missing longer than he was ever alive. Manic Street Preachers are such a riveting group, and I really feel like I've gotten a lot more into them the past few years. Richey's contribution to their final album, The Holy Bible, it's a fucking masterpiece, but even more impressive is how they continued on without him less than 2 years later as bassist Nicky took over writing. James Dean Bradfield is irreplaceable as frontman. In fact, his place in the Street Preachers was cemented even before The Holy Bible and Everything Must Go skyrocketed their career. But as hard as it may be to believe, he's rarely written songs, electing instead to let his bandmates mold the worded weapons he later unloads vocally. Regardless of how many musicians stepped in and out of The Who in their 50+ years, it's always been 2 iconic names together. Pete Townshend and Roger Daltry, on stage and in the studio for the entire run. Roger might very well be the singer, the persona, the spirit, But what's a spirit without its missing link? That's where the rock opera comes into view, because for a band as important, visionary, and massive as The Who, we're gonna need to introduce the unwavering backbone Pete Townshend. Opposites attract, and I guess The Who are living proof that it can work, albeit chaotically, given that none of the band members really ever got along, even at the height of their creativity in the 70s. Pete saw things through a wider lens than Roger, allowing the melodies and words in his head to form songs in an almost dreamlike trance. It's impressive at just how well The Who navigated the calamity of their own existence, even with Pete's hearing loss, the constant infighting, and the 1978 death of legendary drummer Keith Moon. Their early works, including popular staples My Generation and Boris the Spider, weren't exactly reinventing the wheel, but the arrival of timeless albums, Who's Next, Quadrophenia, and Who Are You, showed how Pete's progressive loudmouth writing ended up defining their image musically and lyrically. Limitless inspiration has been handed down from heavy metal pioneers Black Sabbath. Grunge, acid rock, stoner rock, traces of Sabbath are probably in your favorite band's DNA. Ozzy Osbourne is without a doubt the face of the band, even the long periods of time when he wasn't in the band. But Ozzy wasn't handling the lyrics, who would have guessed? It was actually the bass player Geezer Butler nailing down the iconic lines that Ozzy would lay down in the vocal booth. Legend says that Ozzy was often present when lyrics were constructed, with him serving as a conductor, keeping the train on the rails, ironically enough, but rarely overstepping to the point where he'd be credited as the primary songwriter. Now that Black Sabbath has sailed into the sunset, it's almost mesmerizing to look back at their history and to know that there were periods of time when Geezer wasn't even in the band in the 80s, but my hat's off to the Prince of Darkness and to the band behind him tying it all together.
Long as I remember wearing the trousers, I hope he never lets me down again.
Depeche Mode are one of the slickest bands to ever do it. Gentle, tormented voices ring out in a sea of electronic synth rock bliss with enough gothic pop swagger to win over all types of music fans. Dave Gahan has been their lead singer from the start, and given that the band had been a tight trio since the early 80s, many just assumed that he's their lyricist, when in reality, it's multi-instrumentalist and DJ Martin Gore hammering in the illuminating detail. It's impossible to ignore how Depeche Mode's music makes you feel, with lyrics being a huge part of that. It's almost like you're stranded at sea with nothing but gloom in the pit of your stomach. But the darkness in which they sail never feels forced. Instead, it's an intelligent, well-thought-out twinkle for the human condition. Don't take their understated presence in music for granted. They're well-known, but most don't explore beyond the cobwebs of what people typically talk about, like Violator and music for the masses. But speaking as somebody who's fallen in love with Depeche Mode recently, take the plunge. The music will hook you, but it's Martin's ethereal writing that keeps you coming back for more.
Going down, around, and Sugarwood going down, swinging.
The seemingly never-ending post-angst tragedy of Fall Out Boy made them a prime target for bands not actually fronted by their frontman. Instead of Patrick Stump, bassist Pete Wentz took the role and accidentally steamrolled his bandmates in the process. Stump was the lead writer in the early days of the band, but by the completion of their 2003 debut Take This to Your Grave, Wentz had eroded his confidence to the point where Stump literally just said, "You write the fucking lyrics, dude. Just give me your lyrics and I'll write around them." This back and forth struggle led to the darkest, yet most prolific material of Fall Out Boy's career, now referred to as the pre-hiatus run of albums that also includes From Under the Cork Tree, Infinity on High, and their magnum opus, Folie à Deux. Wentz's lyrical supremacy took over, with Album 2 seeing a noticeable uptick in deep, tangled tragedy that went far beyond the high school bitterness and went straight for the gut. Fall Out Boy's music felt like it had consequences, with the questions of life, death, drugs, and rock and roll being realer than what most popular emo and pop-punk leaning acts could rival. Combine those talents with Stump already being a great composer with a knack for unique melodies, and having Andy Hurley and Joe Troman in your band, you're sitting on a powder keg that's waiting to explode. Which is exactly what they did by splitting up in 2009, with Pete Wentz often getting blamed for the hiatus. Fall Out Boy returned in 2013, but it was never the same. The members agreed to divide the credit evenly on each of their albums from that point forward, even assigning lyric duties to everyone instead of just Pete, even if he does still take the lead. So if you've wondered why they've sounded like a light beer, commercialized version of the band you once knew, there's your answer. Wait just a 2112 minute. Wasn't I just talking about Keith Moon, drummer of The Who? Because Neil Peart, god of drumming, was inspired by Moon in his early years as a percussionist, before going on to be one of the most acclaimed drummers of all time and the main songwriter for Rush. When the Canadian prog rock band formed in 1968, Peart wasn't there, and it was Alex Lifeson, Geddy Lee, and former drummer John Rutsey splitting the lyrics. But that all changed by album 2, and away they went, swept up into the future of rock and roll with none other than their innovative drummer riding the way forward. For as much as we can praise the entire band for their relentless chemistry that delivered more than a dozen albums that are definitely worth exploring, it's Neil Peart that shines the brightest, with his wide-reaching drum techniques, his solos, and his ability to fuse socio-political commentary with a fantasy element to his lyrics amongst a sea of changing time signatures. At the end of the day, The Strange Case of Rush only continues to prove why their eccentric, ever-changing qualities made them a special band, where each member was equally known and recognized and respected even within the band for their own accomplishments, and yes, that includes the 80s albums. Y'all are sleeping on Hold Your Fire, Power Windows, Grace Under Pressure, the whole 9 yards. I just realized Fall Out Boy were the only American band on the entire list, and that 5 out of 7 were English. Coincidence? You tell me what you're thinking in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button, and thanks again to Artifon for sponsoring this video. You can check out the Orba linked in the description. There's more episodes of SOS on screen that I think you'll dig if you enjoyed this one. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll be back soon with more on ARTV.